this video I'm going to show you how to use mica powder to do layered stamping. To begin, I'm using this Altenew stamp set that comes from the Altenew box kit magazine. I've chosen the outer stamp from the floral and I'm going to stamp this with embossing ink onto vellum. I'm just dusting the surface with some anti-static powder to prevent the embossing powder from sticking where we don't want it to. And then I'm taking my sticky embossing ink and using this to stamp onto the vellum. I'm doing this in my stamping platform so I can be sure I get a clean and good impression. I always like to ink my stamp up twice to make sure that the image is fully stamped. Once I'm happy that I have stamped the image and got a good impression, I can then proceed to heat emboss it. I remove my sheet of vellum onto a piece of new white copy of paper to catch the embossing powder, and I'm sprinkling over the area to have stamped with clear holographic embossing powder by way. I remove the excess, and there you can see I've got a nice impression. Using my heat gun, I'm going to heat set this. It can be quite hard with sparkly embossing powder to see when this is done, but with this one you see that it turns from a white outline to a sparkly clear one. I'm just going to bring it up to the camera now and you can see that it's very nice and glittery. I'm then using one of the layering stamps in this stamp set. Again, I'm going to dust the area with anti-static powder. I made sure to use one of the layering stamps that didn't cover the whole of the background area, but was quite well covered so we'd be able to see the detail of the mica powder. I'm going in there again with my embossing ink. And I'm going to stamp this again twice to make sure that I get a good impression. I really like this layering stamp set. It's got many different uses of it. You can use the outline on its own to paint and colour, or you can use the layers with your coloured inks to get different effects. Again, I'm going to remove the sheet of vellum to a new piece of white copy of paper, and this time I'm going to take my mica powder. As you can see here, once you open it, it does go everywhere, so you have to be prepared for that if you're going to do this technique. I'm going to take a clean dry brush now and use this to add mica powder onto the image. The mica powder should just stick to the places where you've put the embossing in because it's sticky. I'm just dabbing this on at this point to make sure I get good coverage, and then I use the brush to gently brush it into the embossing ink to get it to stick. Next, I'm going to take a clean brush and use this to brush off the excess of the powder. The powder will stick to part of the vellum where you haven't put the embossing ink, but it won't be as prominent. So you will be able to see the effect at the end. When you're using mica powders, you might be best to use some sort of adhesive, some sort of fixative, otherwise the mica powder can spread to make a mess basically. So I'm using one of the outline dies now that came with the box kit, and I'm lining this up on my die cutting plate. Because I embossed the outline first with the clear glitter embossing powder, it's going to help me to line this up quite well. When you put in your washi tape or your die cutting tape onto the die, make sure you're not touching this to the mica powder because it will probably remove it. So I'm just taping it to the sides of the die cutting plate at this point. Just double check that it's lined up, and then I can run it through my die cutting machine. I'm just using my handy little one that I got from Aldi last year. As you can see here, the mica powder did transfer to the die cutting plate, so I'm just wiping it off with a slightly damp cloth. Just remove the outer die, and then with the help of my scissors, I can remove this, and there's the final finished piece, and you can see all the lovely detail there. I'm now working on the foliage for the card. So I'm using the stencil that came with the magazine, and I'm using a blending brush. This is actually a makeup brush, but it works just the same, and some Stormy Sky Distress Oxide. This Distress Oxide is very juicy, so I didn't even need to go back and re-ink up my blending brush. I'm making sure to choose a few of the different kinds of leaves, as this will give a bit more of a natural variation to the card. Even though we are using blues, it's helpful to make it look naturally appealing to the eye. So I'm just repeating this a few times on the cardstock. I'm going to create 5 leaves, and off camera I did a couple more of the flowers, so I'll have 3 flowers and 5 leaves. I found that using the blending brush is best for this. I did use a finger dauber the first time round. You can see I've left it on my desk there, but it didn't really capture the detail of the stencil very well, so I would suggest that using a blending brush for this is the best. I used my heat gun to dry off the leaves a little bit because they were still quite wet, and then I'm just using my scissors to fussy cut around them, leaving a small white border. Make sure you turn the image as you're cutting it, not the scissors, and this just helps you to get in all the fine details. Just sort of eyeball where the edge is, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I've finished the rest of those off camera, and now I'm just working on the sentiment. So I've put a little strip of black cardstock at the top, and I'm using the Miss You sentiment from the stamp set, going in again with my anti-static powder, and this time I'm going to heat emboss it in white. Just giving it 2 stamps, but I can see on the black card that it has stamped nicely. This time I'm using some white Cosmic Shimmer embossing powder. And I'm just ensuring I've got even coverage, just keeping up a little bit where it wasn't so well covered. Again, I'm using my heating tool to just make sure this gets heat set nicely. As you can see from the side, I've die cut all of the flowers and finished the leaves off camera. So now I can assemble the card. I've got a 5x7 white card blank, and I've cut down a piece of navy metallic cardstock for the base. Then I'm just arranging the flowers and the leaves, just to get an idea of the arrangement I want to go to before I start gluing anything down. I think the leaves will look nice tucked underneath. So now I'm happy with that arrangement, I can start to glue things down. So first of all, I'm going to glue the piece of navy cardstock down. And I've got my Cosmic Shimmer Specialist acrylic glue here with a fine tip nozzle on it. I'm just going to add some glue sparing to it, just making sure I get close to the edges. And then I'm just doing my best to line this up so that I get an even border around the edge with the white cardboard. Then I just need to figure out which flower will be going down first in my arrangement so I know where to glue. Now I know that it's the top one, I'm going to take my glue again and just add it sparingly, mainly on the areas where the mica powder are, as it won't show through as much, but it dries clear so it doesn't look that bad anyway, even if it's just on the piece of vellum. Just gently tapping it down at the edges to make sure it's properly adhered. And as you can see, mica powder does get to quite a few places, it does make a bit of a mess, so I'm just using a cloth to clean that up. Again, like I said before, spraying it with some fixative if you did have it, probably the best thing to do. As the leaves need to go underneath the flowers, I am now arranging those to see where they should go, since now that I've got the flower in place, I know roughly where the arrangement's going to go. So I'm using my the things I've created to figure out where the other thing's going to go. Since they are different shapes and sizes, it's good to figure out where they're going to go first, because as you can see this branch is quite big, so I need to use a bit of a smaller one here, otherwise it's not going to fit. So I glued them all down, this is just me gluing the final one down. Again, just using my Cosmic Shimmer glue. And then I can glue the other flowers on the top. When I was die cutting one of them, it did rip slightly, but don't worry about this if this happens, as it's not very noticeable at all. Again, I'm just very gently patting it down, as these vellum pieces are quite delicate. Now I take my sentiment and I'm trying to figure out where to put this. I had originally planned to cut this down just to be the same size as the Miss You sentiment, but then I thought actually it looks quite nice with the whole strip of it as sort of a banner across the card. So I wasn't sure whether to go at the middle or at the bottom. And in the end I decided that the top was the best place. There was sort of a gap there and I felt like it filled that quite nicely. So just play about with the things you have until you're happy with them, and when they look pleasing to the eye, they're probably the right place to put them. And again, I'm just taking my Cosmic Shimmer glue and gluing this banner down. Then off camera I just cut the edges of this off the card with my scissors. Now I'm just going to add the final few embellishments. I've got a jar of these little raindrop type embellishments, and I'm going to just go with 3 of these. I always think in card making the odd numbers work really well, so I've got 5 leaves, the 3 flowers, and then the 3 gems. And again, just using my fine tip glue nozzle to add these to the card. They will look white to begin with, but when the glue dries they will return to their clear state. When I was choosing the place to put these gems, I sort of looked for places where there was a good distribution of them on the card and where there was sort of an obvious gap. And here's the final card when the glue is dried. Hope you enjoyed this video and thank you for watching.